Y la segunda parte que podemos sacar entre cambio climático y residuos. Bueno, está el tema de los proyectos de compensación. O sea, aparte de todo lo que las empresas necesitan para cumplir con el protocolo de Kioto o lo que venga después, existen muchas empresas que siempre quedarán fuera y particulares que podrán hacer proyectos de compensación. Esto ya está previsto en el artículo 90 y 91 de la Ley de la Economía Sostenible, que habla de los proyectos de compensación de emisiones y la creación de un fondo para la compra de créditos de carbono, que esto básicamente abre una nueva vía. En resumen, mi punto de vista es que los residuos, cuando diseñen la gestión cuando se vuelva a preparar cualquier plan de gestión de residuos, se tendrá que hacer de manera integral, teniendo en cuenta todas las directrices europeas sobre residuos, pero además hay que tener en cuenta que si podemos lograr demostrar que gracias a un modelo de gestión de residuos el país, en este caso España, pero esto puede ser para cualquier país europeo, le ayuda a este tipo de gestión nueva, incentivada, a bajar sus emisiones globales, no solo del sector de residuos, sino de todos los sectores en su conjunto, que es lo que le interesa al país, pues puede tener un tipo de incentivo económico que puede salir de este fondo que os he dicho. ¿De acuerdo? Muchas gracias.
Gràcies, Josep, per la teva intervenció. Seguidament passaríem a la tercera, que és la senyora Heidelor Fiedler, assessora científica de la Subdivisió de Productes Químics de la Divisió de Tecnologia, Indústria i Economia del Programa de Medi Ambient de Nacions Unides. Aquí hi ha hagut un canvi en quant al títol del programa, o al títol de la seva ponència, que versarà sobre tractament de residus i inventaris de dioxines. Senyora Fiedler.
Thank you very much for the invitation to speak here at Reykjavik, this conference, and I would like to address a bit a different issue for another legally binding instrument, which is the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants. I would like to concentrate on waste management issues and the substances that are emitted from these sources. The Stockholm Convention, as I've mentioned, is a global legally binding instrument which entered into force in May 2004, and Spain has been a party to that convention since the beginning. Today, actually it has 172 parties to the convention. One of these legally binding obligations is that inventories of releases of dioxins and furans have to be maintained and have to be updated, and national action plans should be developed and updated every 5 years. The Conference of the Parties has endorsed the methodology to do so, and it also has put in place an expert group of many stakeholders and countries all over the world to update this methodology as science goes on and also as technologies and techniques develop. One of the issues is to develop harmonized reporting formats so that inventories can be compared between regions and also over time. I think that is very common to all of the regulations and measurements. The expert group also recommends that considerations of applications of best available techniques and best environmental practices are included into that expert group that maintains and improves the inventories. Unfortunately, the upper part is not visible, but as you can see, there is a bit of a history of dioxin inventories development. And when in 1999 a report was published, it covered about 15 developed countries, and it was found that the emissions were about 10,500 grams of toxic equivalents that were emitted from these 15 countries, but the primary way or vector of emissions was to the air. When we look at results about 10, 12 years later, we have two groups of countries. The developed countries that largely rely on measured data because they have the dioxin laboratories and regulation in place. These 20 developed countries cover about 800 million people. Then the emissions to air are about 15,000 grams, and in total about 16,000 grams. This means in total that also emissions or releases that are found in water, for example from pulp and paper making, that are found in residues, in ashes, in sludges, are being included, but also in products. When we looked at 62 developing countries that use the UNEP methodology, which includes the releases to air, to water, to land, in residues and in products, you see that the total release is more than twice. And so it is very difficult simply from these numbers to compare the different methodologies and countries. To have a look, for example, these are the countries that use mainly their own methodology, and these are the 62 countries that used the UNEP methodology, and among these only Australia and New Zealand are the only OECD countries that use it. And therefore I would like to go a bit more into detail to explain these numbers here. You will see that the picture is very different between developed countries, OECD countries and developing countries. This is a summary here of these 15 countries I have mentioned from 1999, from Austria through the United States. And what is important, you see here in the red color, the waste incineration, which in these countries mostly is municipal waste incineration, hazardous waste incineration, and also a bit of hospital waste incineration. In several countries, this was a major source, but it already came up in the previous talks that some countries like Austria or Germany and many of the early European Union countries have put measures in place to reduce these emissions, and therefore the contribution in these countries is very small, and others like the ferrous and the non-ferrous metal sector are larger. When we look, this is the UNEP methodology, the standardized toolkit with this 5-vector approach, which is a book of about 250 pages. And that is under review, and it has emission factors according to technologies and sector of emissions. I will show you a bit later, next month, there is a 5th conference of the parties. There is some progress in the emission factors. When we apply this, this here is the rationale for the review and updating, and basically it is being said that it is recommended to use this methodology to get comparative inventories. It looks then like that, and I have here as an example the lead production that according to the technology which is given here, emissions factor to air, to water, to land, product and residue are given as and either the old emission factor or the new emission factor. And you see, fortunately, there were not too many changes, so that the countries that have it already in place don't have to make too many adaptations, but some progress is given. Sometimes you see here the emission factor goes down, or also some activities have an emission factor right now which they did not have before.